Up next is Mr. Amit Bhatia presenting the CX imperative, how BAs can enhance firm's CX competencies. So Amit has more than a decade experience across communication design, usability, and consulting. His research coverage includes customer journey mapping, customer experience design, customer experience measurement, and customer experience maturity. The practice of always focusing on end users gained him lifelong skill of thinking outside in. I think let's hear it from Amit now.
Can you turn on? The mic is on. Great. Thanks, guys. So my name is Amit. I'm from FORRESTER Research. I'm a CX analyst there. And I'm going to talk about a word that you have not heard about since morning at all, customer experience. All right? Before I actually dive into the main topic, which is about how firms can improve their CX competencies, I want to start off with a little personal story. This happened a couple of years ago. This was around the time when I had just sort of moved on from buying physical books to e-books. And I would download these e-books online and read them on my laptop. I remember one day I was sort of stuck in my car. I was waiting for my wife, and I decided to open up the Kindle app on my mobile phone. I had never done that before. It was the first time I was doing it. Now, as soon as I opened up the app, an amazing thing happened. It auto-synced, right? It took me to the exact same page and exact same location that I'd been reading on my laptop the week before. And I'd never seen that happen before. And I was completely blown away. I remember sitting there in my car smiling to myself because of what had just happened. Now, the thing is that I use Kindle even today, across different devices I use that app. But when that auto-syncing happens, I am not so blown away anymore. Today I have come to sort of expect it. And I expect it not only of a technology company like Amazon, but I also expect it from my bank, I expect it from my airline, and where I shop, and all these places. So this really is a story of rising customer expectations. And the thing with customer expectations is that once they rise, they never really come down again. Right? To sort of push this point a little further, I'm going to show you a little video clip. This is from Louis C.K. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of or heard Louis C.K. He's a pretty funny guy. He's an American comedian. This is his take on rising customer expectations. Can you switch the video, please?
We now, in the 21st century, we take technology for granted.
Well, yeah, because now we live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots that don't care, because this is what people are like now. They got their phone, and they're like, it won't. Give it a second. It's going to space. Can you give it a second to get back from space? Is the speed of light too slow? Yeah. I was on an airplane, and there was internet, high-speed internet on the airplane. That's the newest thing that I know exists. And I'm sitting on the plane, and they go, open up your laptop, you can go on the internet. And it's fast, and I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm in an airplane. And then it breaks down, and they apologize, the internet's not working. The guy next to me goes, this is bull. Like how quickly the world owes him something he knew existed only 10 seconds ago. Right. And on planes...
All right, so that's the story of rising customer expectations. That's how quickly it rises. So how are companies supposed to respond, right? How do you respond to something like that? So at Forrester, we believe that a laser-sharp focus on CX and customer obsession is really your only bet to win, serve, and retain your customers. In other words, what we're really saying is that CX matters because of this, right? We have research that shows that better customer experience almost always correlates to higher revenue growth. We have done these studies, we have this data, and this is true across most industries, and this is true across the globe. Right? We see this everywhere. For example, if you look at BFSI, if you look at the banking industry in Germany, for example, you have a CX leader there, ING DiBa, versus a CX laggard like Commerzbank. And just look at the difference in their annual revenue growth rates over 4 years, right? 7.5% versus a negative 1.5%. You look at the insurance industry in the US, and again, you have a CX leader there like Progressive versus a CX leader, a laggard like Travelers, and again, look at the difference in their growth rates. The story repeats across airlines, right? There was a gentleman talking about airlines. So you have, like he correctly said, a CX darling, Southwest, versus United. We've all heard the horror stories about United. And just look at the difference in their growth rates for domestic revenue, global revenue. And the story repeats across different sectors. If you look at retail or if you look at auto, right, we have all those, we have those surveys, we have those details. The same story repeats. It's not just revenue, it's also costs. It helps you reduce costs. Because if you can make products that are better aligned with your customers' needs, you have a lesser need to sort of advertise and market them. If you have fewer problems in your products and services, naturally you get fewer support calls. If you can provide better digital experiences, you can more effectively use self-service tools. And if you can solve problems the first time around, you're going to get fewer repeat calls, right? All these things help you reduce costs. So your revenues are growing faster, your costs are going down. All in all, good customer experience is good business. But what is customer experience, right? We talk to many firms, and even within the same team, people don't have the same understanding of what is customer experience. Right? So just for the rest of this presentation, and hopefully you can carry this definition beyond this presentation with you, we define customer experience very simply as how customers perceive their interactions with your company. Right? Simple definition. So there's two keywords there. First is perceive. Customer experience is a perception. And it's a perception in the minds of your customers, and it is based on the sum of all their interactions with your company. So talking a little bit about perception, right? So this is an example from D&B, but they had internal data that showed that they had 99% on-time delivery. Right? They had data that proved this. But when they went and asked their customers about their on-time delivery, the customers said, we think you are on time only 60% of the time. Right? So it doesn't matter what data you have internally. What matters is what your customers think. Right? As they say, perception is truth. So customer experience is a perception, and as has been sort of repeatedly spoken about since morning, it's across the entire journey. It could be your catalog, it could be your website, it could be how your branch people are behaving, it could even be the form that you have designed for them. It could be what your call center people are saying or not saying. What your delivery boy is saying. All of those things get counted against you as your customer experience. For example, Emirates, when they did a journey mapping exercise, they realized that 2/3 of the touch points did not belong to them. But people thought that this is all customer experience coming from Emirates. Right? So that's the kind of definition of customer experience that we give out. That's the kind of effect it has. So customer experience is how customers perceive their interactions with your company. But this is not just some fluffy concept, right? This is actually measurable stuff. And to be able to measure customer experience, what we do is we break it down into two parts. All right, so this stuff is new. I think maybe the stuff before this, you may have heard in the day, this stuff is new. Customer experience, we break down into two parts. The first is customer experience quality, and the second is the loyalty effects that it has, right? And again, customer experience quality, you can break down into three parts. The first is whether that experience is effective, right? Does it actually do the thing it is supposed to do? Is it easy? Are customers getting that value without difficulty? And the last is about emotion. Do customers feel good about the experience? Right? So the three sort of aspects of any customer experience quality. And the next is the loyalty effects that it has. And again, we sort of break that down into three. The first is retention, loyalty. Are customers going to keep their existing business with you? Then there is enrichment, loyalty. Are they going to increase their business with you basis their customer experience? And the last is advocacy, loyalty. Are they actually going to go out and talk about your product and services to other people? And we take all of these sort of concepts together to measure customer experience. We have our own methodology called the CX Index. And what we do is we go out and we poll, we ask customers about questions about the three facets of customer experience quality and the loyalty effects. This is how we measure at Forrester. We have our own methodology called the CX Index. This is how we measure customer experience. A little more about this a little later. Just a quick peek at what's happening with customer experience in India. Right? This is something that we track. We send out, as you know, Forrester does a lot of surveys. It talks to a lot of companies, and this is what we see. Whenever you talk to companies about customer experience, there's one sort of common thread that we see repeating, and that a common thread is one of ambition. Right? Indian companies are very ambitious about the kind of experiences they want to provide. In a survey that we ran last year, we saw that half of the people responding said that they want to provide the best CX in their industry. Right? Half of them said that. Further to that, 1/3 said that they wanted to provide the best CX across industries. Right? So if you're a bank, you're saying that I want to provide the best CX not only amongst banks, but also banks and airlines and retail stores and restaurants and all of those put together. Right? That's how ambitious we are with respect to the customer experience we want to provide. But customer experience, like I said, is not about what companies say, right? Customer experience is about the customer. So let's look at what customers are saying in India about the CX that they receive. Now, to answer that question, we actually went out and measured the customer experience in India. Okay, we used our own methodology, which I said was the CX Index. We went out and we polled more than 18,000 Indian consumers about more than 72 brands, and we asked them questions about the customer experience quality and about their loyalty. There's a 50 to 60 sort of set of questions that we go through with these consumers, and we ask them. And what we found was that most Indian firms are actually providing customer experience that is just about okay. Right? The way we sort of slot them is that if you get a score from 80 to 100, you are excellent. If you are 70 to 80, you are good. If you are 60 to 70, you're okay. Right? And this is what we found, that the majority of Indian firms are actually providing customer experience that is just about okay. And if we had to sort of look at this data with respect to industries, we found that PC manufacturers and banks are providing the best customer experience today in the country. This is what customers are saying, followed by credit card providers, mobile manufacturers, and so on. And this trend is global. Right? We run this study not only in India, we run this in the US, we run it in Europe, we run it in Australia. We find that financial companies are almost always at the top. A small sort of anomaly here is that we are seeing digital-only retailers come right towards the bottom. We don't see that in other markets. We see them leading in other markets. But this is what we find different in India. So now just think about how ambitious these companies are and the kind of experience they actually end up delivering. Right? There's a big gap. Right? 79% firms are aspiring to be a CX leader in one way or the other, but only 1 out of 4 is delivering customer experience that is good. Now, if companies want to sort of address this gap, one key question comes up to these companies is, whose job is it to improve customer experience? Who's responsible for customer experience? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to take a slight detour here. So just bear with me. I'm going to come back to this question, but to try to answer this, I'm going to tell you a little story about butterflies. So this is about butterflies, and at one point there were lots of butterflies in the Zion National Park in the US. Around the early 1900s, they started developing this park. They had more and more humans come in. They had a lot of tourists come in. And what happened is that because more of these tourists started coming in, these predators, like these very beautiful cougars, they started retreating. And these cougars started retreating. They were predators, right? Now, as a result of these cougars retreating, the deer population in the national park shot up, right? Because they weren't scared anymore. So the deer population shot up. But these deer are not only, super cute, but they're also always super hungry. They eat up stuff, whatever comes in their path, right? Leaves, branches, shrubs, whatever it is, they keep eating all the time. And because this deer population had sort of shot up, and they were eating so much of this vegetation, they were eating also things like these shrubs that were lining the riverbanks there. And because these sort of shrubs started disappearing, this started resulting in soil erosion. And as a result of that soil erosion, what happened was these naturally blooming flowers that were there in the national park, they started to disappear. And because these flowers started to disappear, these butterflies went away, right? They had nothing to eat. Now, if you think of this whole story, it's actually an ecosystem, right? It's interlinked, different elements affecting each other. So you had the humans coming in, and the predators going away, and the deer population going up, and the vegetation and the flowers disappearing, and ultimately the butterflies disappearing. So this is an ecosystem. Now, the thing about ecosystems is that if you want to solve a problem, for example, if you want to solve the problem of these missing butterflies, you cannot simply airdrop more butterflies into that national park and solve that problem. Right? You can't do that. It won't solve the problem. The only way you can solve this problem is if you sort of put your lens to the entire ecosystem and not just the butterflies that disappeared. Now, this is not very different from your customer journey, right? When customers experience you at different touch points, and if you want to improve the experience at a particular touch point, there's no way you can find answers just by focusing on that touch point. What you need to do is you need to put your lens on the entire underlying ecosystem, right? Because this ecosystem that is interacting to create that experience at each of these points. And you as business analysts are very much part of this ecosystem, right? And this ecosystem is what we call the customer experience ecosystem. It's a web of relations among all the different aspects of a company, including its employees and partners and its operating environment, its policies, all of those things, right? All of these things together comes and sort of determines the quality of the customer experience that you are providing. So if I had to sort of ask you this question again, whose job is it to improve customer experience? I think it would be fair to say that it's the responsibility of the ecosystem. Right? The entire ecosystem and all the actors in it play a part to improve the customer experience. But how do you actually improve the CX ecosystem? What does it mean to improve the ecosystem? So to answer that question, I'm going to take a little Olympic inspiration. When P.V. Sindhu, when she won the silver last year at Rio, her coach was asked, what is it that you guys did to actually get there? And this is what he had to say. He said there are some constants that you need to follow to excel at the international level. Now, much in the same way, Forrester went out and we interviewed CX leaders of the world to figure out what is it that they are doing in their ecosystems that they are able to provide these world-beating experiences consistently. And this is what we found. The customer experience leaders constantly excel at 6 CX competencies. customer understanding, prioritization, design, delivery, measurement, and culture. Right? These are the 6 things that they excel at. This is common amongst all the people that are good at customer experience, all the companies that are good at customer experience. I'll very quickly take you through each of these. So the first is customer understanding. CX leaders understand that the customers are in the market not just for quarter-inch drills, but for quarter-inch holes. Right? And they get to that understanding by not only looking at analytical data about their customers and quantitative data about their customers, not only looking at what their customers are saying in terms of feedback, but they also do things like ethnographic research, which gives them much richer insights about what's happening with their customers and what their customers really want. For example, Barclays was in Africa, and they realized that they were in that continent for over 100 years, but they were serving just 1% of the population. And they decided to change that, right? And to be able to change that, they hired a design company called Dublin, which is now part of Deloitte. They hired these guys, and what they did was that they went and actually lived in the largest slums of Kenya for 6 weeks just to figure out what financial inclusion meant for those people. So that's the kind of work these companies do to understand what their customers want and become better at customer experience. The next is prioritization. Now, all companies have limited resources, right? Nobody has infinite resources. But what CX leaders do well is that they figure out who their most important customers are and what their most experiences are, all right? Now, we take this question to many organizations, and very few are actually able to quickly answer who are your most important customers, right? Even if it's senior leadership, you have people looking around the room and saying, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. So this is something that companies need to figure out. Who are your most important customers? What are their most important experiences? And then you channel your limited resources to address those needs first. What CX leaders don't do is this. Right? This is whack-a-mole. If you've been to a mall, you've probably seen this game. We have that little mole, coming up, and you whack it down, and then suddenly there's something else coming up, and you run after that. Right? This is not what CX leaders do in terms of resolving customer experience problems. The next is design. Now, design is such a misunderstood word. Customer experience leaders understand that design is not what something looks like, but design is how something works. Right? That is design. So you have the likes of a financial company like Capital One that actually went out and acquired a design company. And you have the likes of Samsung and IBM that have hired designers in the thousands. And you have a company like PepsiCo that has publicly sort of claimed that design was a way forward for them. They even hired a chief design officer. So these CX leaders, they use human-centered design principles like journey mapping. You've heard, again, a lot about journey mapping through the day. But that journey mapping, it helps them move from process to story. For example, this is a sample of a broadband customer. And look at how nicely they've sort of mapped out the emotions of this customer, what's happening at different touch points. And they know where it's dipping, and they know that this is the gap that they need to address. They do things like prototyping. So this is an example from Holiday Inn, where when they were trying to build a new hotel lobby, they actually went and prototyped the whole thing. So this is made of foam, and they built out the whole thing so that customers could walk in, and employees who are going to be working in places like these, they could walk in and give quick feedback about what needs to be improved. The next comes delivery. Right? So now CX leaders, they sort of understand what their customers want. They prioritize what they should be working on. They design the right experiences. The next comes delivery. How do you make sure that your employees are actually delivering what you designed, right? So CX leaders, they go out and define activities for each role that is in line with the vision and design of customer experience. I would like to sort of emphasize the word vision here because very, very few companies actually come out with a customer experience vision. So if you don't have a customer experience vision, that means your employees don't know what is the ideal behavior or the ideal experience they should be providing their clients, be it in terms of physical talking to somebody, or even if the kind of systems you are designing or the kind of websites you build, what is it actually supposed to deliver at the end of the day in terms of the experience? What experience should that person walk away with? So you have a bank in the US which specifically said that we want to be welcoming, right? So welcoming was their vision. So everything that they did in their branch, in their website, all of that was centered around this whole aim to be welcoming, right? So that's the importance of a CX vision. So you need to define the activity so that each person in the organization knows that, okay, this is the kind of behavior expected. You got to train employees to deliver better CX with soft skills. You have to give them the right tools. And you also have to sort of check whether the delivered CX is in line with the CX vision. And this is where the next competency comes, and this is measurement. Right? You need to measure what experience are you delivering, and then what is the gap with what you envisioned in the first place. So typically companies use NPS, you have CSAT, we have companies using the CX index as well. But what CX leaders do well is that they tie together all of these different levels of measurement so that they are able to pinpoint the correct drivers that are driving the customer experience. The last one is culture, and certainly not the least. And again, you've heard this from multiple speakers today. If I had to say out of these 6 competencies, culture is by far the most important. Culture is what employees are doing when you're not in the room. Right? You can give people the processes and the tools and all of those things, but they aren't going to deliver good customer experience if you don't have the right culture. So CX leaders recognize this fact. So you have an example here from ING Bank. When they were trying to come up with a new banking format, they realized that while you can teach somebody to be a banker, you can't teach them to like people. Right? You can't do that. So they sort of twisted that on its head, and they decided to hire hospitality types and not bankers. And they changed their hiring process and their policies and all of these things. They changed all of this so that they could hire the right kind of people. So those are 6 competencies. And I want you, as business analysts, I want you to think about these as a kind of different facets of what are the kind of things you can participate in. So I want to leave you with 3 thoughts. Number 3 is you got to measure and improve your CX competencies, which is sort of obvious. I just spoke about this. For example, talk about customer understanding. Right? As BAs, you go out and do a lot of requirements gathering. How can you do that better? Who are you actually talking to? Are you talking to the client? Are you talking to the client's client? Right? Figure those things out. Ask if there is ethnographic research study available for those customers who you're creating your tools for. In terms of prioritization, right? When you're trying to figure out which feature to prioritize, figure out which customers is this for, how important is that customer, whose experience you want to improve. In terms of design, figure out whether the tools that you're creating or the software that you're creating, is it in line with the CX vision? Is there even a CX vision that the company has? Learn the design methods, design thinking, all of those things, prototyping, journey mapping. If there was one thing that if I could say that there's one thing that you can take away from this whole day that you listen to different people, there was one thing I'd tell you to take away that is journey mapping. It's such a simple tool, but it is so important and it's so sort of eye-opening when you actually run through that exercise. It's amazing. So we were doing a workshop with a bank, and the senior leaders were there, and we were trying to map out a simple journey, which was updating the address. Right? Updating the address was one journey we were mapping together with them. And these guys came in, and the team that handles that was there, and they said, no, this is this is a tiny thing, why are we even mapping this? This gets over in a few steps. And we started mapping it, all right? And we were doing this on an 8-foot wall, right? We were putting those sticky notes saying this is what happens, this is what happens. We ran out of space. We ran out of space, and these guys were so taken aback because they didn't realize this is so complicated for their customers. Right? That's the power of journey mapping. Right? The simple way, put yourself in the shoes of your customers, and as business analysts, you must certainly learn how to do it, and you must certainly participate in journey mapping. And ecosystem mapping, which I spoke about, right? Where at each touch point you figure out who are the key players and what are the key policies and processes that come into play. And as measurement, right? Do you know what CX metrics your customers, your clients are using? Typically, we see BA teams being appraised on project management sort of metrics, right? Is it on time? Is it within budget? But if you were to start getting appraised on the kind of experience that your software creates for your customers, that's what is going to incentivize you guys to think more and more about the customer. So that's measurement. And the last is culture. How do you build an outside-in perspective, right? And this is not only for BAs, but also BA leadership, senior managers, business analysts. How do you hire business analysts? How do you train them? What are the skills that you look for, and what are the skills that you give them? Even starting to use the kind of language that CX people typically use, right? For example, there's always confusion about who's the customer, right? Everybody says customer, but in the minds of the tech teams, it's always, oh, this is the client. But it always should be the client's client, right? Who you're actually building stuff for. And how many times do you actually get a chance to engage with real customers? But you should certainly try and ask for these things, saying that, this is the person, who is it I'm building the software for, right? Who's the person, how is he going to use it, what are his key characteristics? Try and meet them, and personas, again, the gentleman before me spoke about personas, again, a very key way of understanding who your customers are. So this is how we look at the kind of 6 competencies. These are things that you can do, so you got to improve your CX competencies. The next, again, this is not just for BAs, this is for firms and senior leaders as well. You have to coordinate your CX efforts across the company. Because I've been in more than one meeting where we are talking to marketing and they don't know what the customer service team is doing to improve customer experience. Or we're talking to the customer service team, but they have no idea what operations is doing to improve customer experience. And they're all doing things. They're all, they have different initiatives. They're trying to come up with their own tools or different kinds of things. So this is advice that we give out, that you must coordinate, firms should coordinate their CX efforts across the company, either through processes, where marketing is talking regularly to operations, is talking regularly to customer service, and all of those things. And I believe that sort of comes together nicely if you have a customer experience vision in the first place, right? Once you have the vision at a central level that is blessed by leadership, that sort of helps percolate down to all the different people, and then those things start working in sync, including what is the software we should be building, how it should behave. And the last one is, obviously, you've got to start with the CX, not the other way around, and you have to work backwards towards the technology, coming not from me, but this gentleman. With that, I'd like to close and say thank you. If there are any other questions that you have, I'd like to take them now, please. All right. There's a question, please.
Thanks, Amit. It was very insightful on the journey part. So just want to check on that while plotting the journeys. I know we used a lot of physical papers and things.
Right.
Do we have any tools available right now which we can use?
We do have tools, but those tools come at a later stage. There are certain tools, the names escape me right now, but I can certainly get back. There are tools in the market. And we get this question very often when we go and have these journey mapping conversations, because we do journey mapping as a service for companies. So they ask us, अच्छा software क्या चाहिए? We don't need a software. It's not about software. It's about getting the right people, we need sticky notes, that's all.
Yeah, we do that on whiteboard actually.
You do it on?
It's a big whiteboard which we start doing it. So what I was saying is, when we do the whiteboarding, people generally don't tend to understand the journeys. It's very difficult for them to explain.
Right.
So what we wanted to see that show them the tool, that this is what its output would be probably. But the process will take through the physical thing and charting and boarding. But if the tool gives them the convention or conviction to people that, user journey is very important, because it's kind of new thing to people.
No, so I've been part of many workshops.
Correct.
What helps is sensitizing people about thinking outside in, and the importance of customer experience. And you show them, and we show them examples of how journey mapping helps come up with new kind of thinking, and it sort of opens up people's minds. And what helps is if you have senior leaders in the room, that helps a lot. Because if you don't have senior leaders in the room, then after you may have done journey mapping, after half an hour, 1 hour, people start goofing off and those kind of things. But if senior leaders are there and they're committed to that, we have seen results. We have certainly seen results not only outside India but in India as well. So we never have any conversation about the tools ever with any of our clients. Yeah, sure.
You talked about organization culture.
Right.
What I feel is the most tough thing to change within the organization.
Absolutely.
So what's your take and what's your suggestion? Like if the stakeholders are reluctant, like how to deal with it?
So organization culture culture flows from the top, and that's very simple. So if you have a leader who doesn't believe in that, or if you have a leader who is behaving in a way that is not customer centric, and that is not going to, then there's no way. You can try and kickstart these little fires through different exercises through the organization. It's not going to work, right? So the first thing is you need a leader at the top who believes that we need to change our culture, and we find in fact that culture is mutable. You can actually change culture over time, but you need the leaders at the top to start doing to start doing things differently, to actually walk the line. Right, doing things like I think somebody was giving an example before, where you actually go and meet the people you are serving, right? Understand their pain points. When your leaders start doing that and start propagating these messages, then that trickles down slowly. But it takes time. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It is the hardest thing, by far the hardest thing to start to do and to take up. But it's possible.
You ended this beautiful presentation by showing a quote from Steve Jobs. I want to ask you something that his philosophy is something like, a customer doesn't know what he wants, right? So,
yeah.
so how, as a BA, do you suggest us to...
No, I think so. He was one of the, he was an exception. He was an exception to that rule. Where he believed that he knew much better than what customers really what they want. But I think as BAs, you need to start asking these questions. Who are we actually creating these tools and software for? You need to push and typically marketing has this responsibility, right? To think about personas and to think about who are we serving, because they like to sell to those guys. So perhaps you can consider going to marketing and asking them these questions and partnering with them to understand a little bit more about who your customers are, and then pushing them slowly towards things like ethnographic research and all those things.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
This one here, please.
On one side, we have this rising customer expectations where, a customer who's complaining about a thing which probably didn't know existed 5 minutes before. And on the other side, we have companies, who are more customer-centric, who's becoming customer-centric day by day. So how do you think we find a balance, we as companies find a balance among both these factors? Is there a way you find a balance, or is it like companies needs to push themselves and be more promising to the customers and enhance their customer experience, or is there a balance between these?
No, sorry, I didn't get your question. Could you rephrase it?
I mean, like on one side there is this rising customer expectations, and on the other side there is companies who are more customer centric these days. So, but then sometimes the expectations from the customers are a little unrealistic or maybe very demanding, right?
Yeah.
So, and
So
how do you
part
take that?
So part of customer experience is not only providing them the product and service, but a lot of it is also communication, right? What are you communicating to your people? So my colleague ran this study in the US very recently, and she found that communication with the customer plays an outsized role in the kind of expectations that they have and the kind of experiences they walk away with. I'll give you a simple example. So I was traveling, I travel pretty often, and we get sort of stuck in the aircraft sometimes when the aircraft is waiting to taxi, and we are just waiting there, and it's 10 minutes and it's 15 minutes, and there is no communication from the pilot as to why are we stuck and why is the AC not functioning. Now, people who travel more know that because there's a longer taxiway, they need to conserve their power for takeoff, so they're not going to turn on that AC irrespective of what you tell them. But I was in a flight once where the pilot, he was so proactive. I think this was Go Air. He was so proactive in communicating that we are number 5, there are 4 more sort of aircraft ahead of us, and the way this works is that they let 1 aircraft fly and 2 aircraft land, and he explained the whole thing. And despite waiting there for 25 minutes, nobody complained. Right? So communication plays a very important part there. Yeah, sure.
Probably I missed the initial part, but I just want to ask if you have already answered it. Sorry. Most of the times we get confused with visualizations being the customer experience, like what we see on the screen. And in a, let's say, product which is e-commerce, or probably even the normal products which we develop, right?
Sure.
So what's one liner you can give it to the senior management or anybody, all the stakeholders, that this is not the user experience or customer experience? It involves a lot of things behind. So how do you convince, if you say, for example, you do consulting?
So that's what I sort of covered when I spoke about design, right? Yeah. Design is not what something looks like, it's how something works. Though it is not that what something looks like is not part of design, right? Because
it's
if I go to a website, but
it's
not the only part.
Correct.
Unfortunately, in India especially, we see this, when we talk about design, instantly people start thinking, visual design.
I
and
see it in North America.
Right? Can you put lipstick on this pig? Right? Those kind of attitudes are there. And it comes to the design teams very, very late. So it helps if, first of all, leaders understand, the role of design. And I was reading a nice article yesterday that said when companies and technologists go to designers, they have the answer in mind already, saying, this is the solution, can you make something for this? And now designers, the way they are trained is to think very differently. The first thing that designers do is that they reframe the problem. Right? They always ask questions and they reframe the problem. So now until this understanding of design comes, percolates more and more into technology teams, that problem is going to be there. But it's improving. It's certainly improving over time. All right, thanks.
Hi, this is Manoshmini. Since afternoon, I've been hearing a lot about customer experience, and
me too.
And until yesterday, I was more hearing about, in my work especially, about user experience. I'm trying to understand how difference is both of them, user experience and customer experience.
So the thing is, so a couple of different things there. So UX is part of CX, but the way it is defined, because a lot of our touch points today are digital, so a lot of UX created by UI teams becomes also the customer experience. But customer experience is much larger in the sense, typically people responsible for customer experience, they come from different backgrounds. They're responsible for things like how much is the customer buying, or what is the kind of experience he has. They are responsible for straddling teams across operations, across marketing, across customer service, and all these different teams. They typically report into a chief operating officer. So there's a very different background of people who are addressing customer experience problems, and also the kind of responsibilities that they have. So typically people who are in UX, they come from a hardcore design background, and so far the responsibilities have been very narrow, and only in terms of either building apps or websites, and being responsible for the design of those things. So I would say UX sort of gets subsumed in the larger customer experience sort of paradigm completely. But UX is certainly part of CX. But as soon as you say CX, it opens up like a whole can of worms, typically, because you have things like strategy and branding and culture and politics and all those things sort of come in, because if you want to try and change the customer experience or transform the customer experience, so UX is just then one aspect of that, right? There are many other different things. How are you incentivizing your employees, right? That goes into HR, right? How are you incentivizing? So it tries to straddle all of these things.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Close here. Thank you so much for listening to it. Cheers.
Thank you, Amit.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for giving us an insight on all the competencies that we need to build. And in my own experience, when I joined Franklin Templeton, one of my directors asked me to actually go and sit in a branch where the customer footfall happens, and actually observe how the entire, how we capture the details of the customers. And also, to add to that, come back and do a KYP, know your partner, meaning understand how the other business units work along with us. So I think all that adds up to the customer experience that we are hearing today a lot about.